Okay, so this recipe requires 1 kilogram of bread flour. I personally am not using bread flour here, I'm using normal cake flour. It works the exact same way, you just have a different sort of taste. It's not as bready, which is perfectly fine. But yeah, I'm also measuring with my eye and the feel just from a 2.5 kilogram bag to roughly how much I needed. So it doesn't have to be exact. And to that, we are adding 600 mils of lukewarm water. So we kind of want to make a bit of a slurry with this of the water, the sugar, as well as the yeast. So we're going to add a tablespoon of sugar to the lukewarm water. Now we'll add a little bit of sweetness and allow the sugar to react with the yeast and allow it to ferment and the dough to rise. So it's a sachet of yeast. The actual milligrams or millage is within the recipe at the end of this video. So if your sachets are different, you can just take a look at that. But just empty it out fully into your jug and then you mix it all together. This yeast mixture doesn't look too appealing, but trust me, it works. It is literally the salt, sugar, and a sachet of yeast that is added to some lukewarm water. Not too hot, otherwise the yeast won't develop the way it should. It really doesn't look that appealing, but it works. This is what makes the dough rise, and obviously you're activating the yeast with the sugars. That's why you need that bit of sugar. And then the salt and everything just to bring out that flavor a little bit more. But this thing gets added to the flour. So one thing I do when I'm cooking especially is any important jewelry or rings that I wear, obviously my wedding ring and engagement ring, I take off and I'll use a dummy ring. Sorry about the messy fingers, but I have been kneading the dough. Yeah, you basically use a dummy ring or just remove it completely. It's way easier. And your actual jewelry then doesn't get messed up. However, this one always stays on. Okay, so now we're going to start kneading the dough. In the meantime, what you can also do is put your oven on a very, very low temperature for about 5 minutes. Doesn't have to be top and bottom, maybe just the bottom or the top, either or, but just to allow some heat to get into a space so that once we're done kneading the dough, it can proof. And we don't want it too hot because the same thing with the water, it will then stop the yeast from proving and the dough from rising. It will basically stop the yeast from being active. So yeah, we just knead the dough a little bit. It doesn't have to be done too much because we have already stirred it quite a bit in the bowl. So what we're doing here is just adding air pockets, really creating some friction for the yeast to start forming. If things start getting a little bit sticky, you can always just add some flour to the surface and it'll help you manage the dough a little bit better. This is a very messy process. It's something that could be quite fun to do with kids for school holidays. You know, you each have their own pizza that they can make, or just family get-togethers. You've got a pizza oven or one of those surfaces you can do within the bra grid, and this is something very nice. As you can see, it is a big batch of dough that is made. You keep kneading. You will find that it does get quite sticky in places. I saw a hack somewhere that you just keep kneading through it, and eventually the stickiness stops. I don't know so much, and I think it's a sensory thing for myself too, because this is just a nightmare. I would rather just add some extra flour, but essentially that is what people are doing. As I say, the sensory thing for me was just too much, so I've added some flour onto the surface again to just make sure that this is easily to knead. So essentially you should have one of those scrapers for making pastries. They sort of bring things in together. I don't have one of those, so today we are just rocking it as is. As I say, this is a messy process. Your counters and your floor will need to be cleaned afterwards. But when you're kneading the dough, it almost feels a bit warm, and that is the yeast activating and you creating those connections within the dough itself. Cool. Once we have kneaded it a little bit, just do some final sort of rolls into place, and you have your dough. Now, I'm just going to go clean my hands, and then I'll explain what we're going to do with this afterwards. Okay, so once the dough is kneaded and your hands are cleaned, there's no residual dough, just remember to now turn off your oven, ensure that it is just the right temperature in terms of warmth. You don't want it feeling too hot. Just something where you can just feel a little bit of a warm day type of heat. If you're staying in a warm climate or something that's a little bit more humid, or the day itself is maybe in the 25s, 27 degrees, you don't need to do this because the heat in the room itself will allow for the dough to rise. But if not, and if you just want to be 100% sure, then just let the oven warm up and just allow the dough to proof. You're also able to do it with a warmer drawer, so if your oven has one of those, that is a possible option. For now, as I said, you don't have to clean your bowl at this stage. So we still have our dirty bowl here. You're just going to add a little bit of oil to the base of it, and we're going to put our dough back inside. Okay, so I've added a little bit of oil at the bottom. You can see it there. It's not really too much. I'd say a teaspoon or two. And what you want to do is just roll the bowl around and sort of coat those edges so that when the dough rises, it doesn't get sticky or stuck to the side of the bowl. From there, you can take the dough, that ball, place it inside, and just sort of spin it around and ensure that the top and bottom of the dough is coated. And that's what you've got. From here, you cover it, and some people suggest a damp towel, others just use parchment paper, but cover it and place it in that warm space, whether it be your oven, your warmer drawer, or just the room. So my microphone stopped working halfway through, the battery died, so I do apologize for if there's a break in sound or anything that happened that you may have missed, but we have put the dough into the oven to proof, so that is busy, and now we're going to start making the toppings. So this is definitely up to you, it's your personal preference. We are going to do a bacon pizza. It would have had pineapple, but the pineapple is finished. We've made another meal earlier in the week. So it will be bacon, possibly some hot honey, and a variety of cheeses. And then the other option is going to be a Mexican pizza. So we are making some ground beef. We're going to add some jalapenos to that, and then just a bit of cheese. And both of these will have a tomato base. So yeah, we're going to start prepping the toppings in the meantime while the dough proofs. So the mince has been cooked, and I enlisted the help of my husband to come and break up the ground beef. So that is cooked, it is now cooling on the stove behind me, and what we're going to do now is just chop up the fresh vegetables that will go on to the various pizzas. So what I'm thinking is some peppers, green and a yellow bell pepper, and then those can go onto the bacon pizza, and then also just a few fresh red cherry tomatoes that will then be on the Mexican. Not too many because the acidity might take away from the Mexican flavor, but just a few for some color and to break up that spiciness a little bit. So I just chatted to my husband to see what else we could put on this bacon pizza, and that's him there behind me. He's busy gaming away, so I'll be joining him shortly. But in the meantime, we decided we have some biltong left over from a pack that we had bought, so we're going to just dice that up in small little pieces, and it'll be a bacon biltong pizza. And we'll probably add a little bit of hot honey still, as I said, just to bring out that sweetness. So it's salty, sweet, and then maybe a little bit of a meat barbecue-y type of sauce, but we will see how it goes. I think the flavor profile is going to be really, really good, and I can't wait to try it. It's going to turn out amazingly. So I've just gathered a little bit of biltong here. It is quite thick, quite fatty, but very, very good nonetheless. So we're just going to dice it up to put onto our bacon pizza. And some for the chef. So we have finished prepping all the food that is going to go onto the top of the pizza, and I'll show you in a short while what we have done and what we've made. But the dough has risen. It is looking so good. We're going to leave it for now because it is still quite early in the afternoon, and there's no harm in doing that. It will just continue to rise, which is perfect. We are going to go and watch some Formula One. It is the Dutch Grand Prix this weekend, so let the dough do its thing, and then later on we will be back to actually assemble the pizzas and put it in the oven. So we have our bacon that is all diced. We've got some biltong, cherry tomatoes, green and yellow bell peppers, and then some ground beef that we have cooked. We've added some hot sauce to it, and all of these toppings are now ready and sorted for when the dough is finished proving and when we're ready to eat and assemble. We've also left the flour out because obviously as we roll the dough out, we will need some flour to just help us roll and to not stick to the countertops, but all sorted and ready for just now. Okay, so we have watched the F1, a little bit of it, and we are now ready for dinner. So what we're going to do is just pull out the dough. We can see how much it's risen, roll it out, and then start assembling our pizzas. So as you can see, just by taking off the baking sheet paper, it actually worked a lot better than a dish towel. So in future I will be doing the same thing and then we don't have to worry about dirty dish cloths anymore or trying to get them clean. So just a piece of baking paper over the top will stick to the top of the dough and stop it from drying out. You can also see just how beautifully this dough has risen. It is full to the brim and it has fluffiness to it. So yeah, let's roll it out. What you can do is add flour to your baking tray. I generally just do baking paper instead. I find it doesn't stick that way. And yeah, then we just roll out. The thinnest you want to go is about 1 centimeter thick. You don't want to go any thinner than that. Okay, then to lift it onto your tray, you can just pick it up, roll it over, and transfer. There we go. Once it's on your tray, you can pinch the edges a little bit, just extend pieces out, but that's your first base done.
Okay, so now that the bases are prepped, I've enlisted the help of my husband again, and we are just putting the tomato base onto the pizzas. So you can use a tomato puree or your favorite pizza base sauce, or even just normal tomato sauce. And to that you just add a bit of garlic. The garlic, measure with your heart. There is never an amount that is too much garlic. And from there you just add your toppings. So for us, it is the ground beef or the mince mixture. So for this pizza we are making the Mexican, and you just spoon it out onto an even layer on top of your pizza. From there, for a bit of greenery, we're adding the peppers. So a few green peppers on here. We just be careful not to have too much big pieces together, so that when you bite into it, the cheese pulls off in one big blob, basically. You want to have a nice little even amount of that. And then to the top, you can add your cheese. I know some people put cheese below the toppings, but for this Mexican pizza specifically, rather add the cheese on top, as it seals it in and it almost stops it from sliding or moving around. And then the last finishing touches is the jalapenos. We set this one aside, and onto the next ones. We have two smaller versions instead of one big tray, but they are both going to be our bacon and biltong pizzas. So here we've added the bacon, we've added the few slices of biltong to it. And again, just nice even layers. You don't want to add too many toppings, otherwise the pizza itself gets too heavy and then the dough doesn't rise as it should in the oven. So just be cognizant of that. But yeah, then we can just add our peppers, green and yellow, as well as our cheese on top. And then this goes into the oven. So the pizzas are out. They have been in the oven for 30, maybe 40 minutes. And they are crispy, they have risen, and they just look so delicious. So 180 for 30 to 40 minutes, and you will get beautiful looking pizzas. Thank you for watching, guys. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Check you in the next one.